Okay, everybody, let's talk about one of our more formidable adversaries in EMS, and that is shock. Okay, a major player, major enemy of ours. And what we have to be able to do as EMTs is be able to recognize when somebody is in shock, because I guarantee with shock, we are behind the eight ball. We need to play a little game of catch up. And the longer it takes for us to recognize, the more catch up that we have to do. And that's what this lecture is all about. Now, that being said, okay, even at the basic level, all right, if we can recognize the signs and symptoms of shock early, we could do a lot to benefit our patient. Okay, so make sure you guys are paying attention to this. This is going to be a pretty important lecture for you guys, and we'll get started right away. Here we go. Okay, so we are going to be going over the National Emergency Medical Services Education Standards Competencies while teaching shock. This is a very important lecture, guys. Please make sure you guys watch this more than once and bring whatever questions you got when we meet up for class. Okay, so shock and resuscitation. It applies a fundamental knowledge of the causes, pathophysiology, and management of shock, respiratory failure or arrest, cardiac failure or arrest, and post-resuscitation management. We're going to talk about all this in this lecture coming up. I want to do my own introduction before we get into the introduction for this. I want you guys to remember this little saying. I want you guys to remember it for the rest of your lives. I don't care what aspect of medicine that you guys are going into. I don't care if you guys are becoming cardiothoracic surgeons or physician's assistants or a regular family practice MD, respiratory therapist, nurse practitioner, whatever the hell it may be. Okay? I want you guys to remember this little saying. Respiratory distress leads to respiratory arrest, which leads to cardiac distress, which leads to cardiac arrest. Okay? I'm going to say that again. Respiratory distress leads to respiratory arrest, which leads to cardiac distress, which leads to cardiac arrest. Okay? If we can't find out that the patient is in shock, we have to figure out where we are in that little algorithm that I just give you in order to find out how aggressive we are going to be for our patients. I'm going to tell you guys right now, that's not the last time you're going to hear that coming out of my mouth. I want that to haunt your dreams. I want you guys going to sleep hearing me in the back of your head. Respiratory distress leads to respiratory arrest, which leads to cardiac distress, which leads to cardiac arrest. I want it to wake you up in the middle of the night. I want to be like, oh my God, my teacher's here, right? That's how much I want you guys to remember this, okay? So, as far as an introduction, okay, I'm going to make this really easy for you, okay? Shock. Also, oh, excuse me. Sorry, guys. I didn't mean to sneeze on this. Shock, also known as hypoperfusion or lack of perfusion or inadequate tissue oxygenation. Okay? Inadequate tissue perfusion. You're going to see 1,000 different definitions for shock. Okay? I'm going to break it down into 3 words for you. Inadequate tissue perfusion. Period. That is the definition of shock. That is the definition I want you guys to know for shock at the EMT basic level. Okay? When we're talking about shock, this is a state of collapse and failure of our cardiovascular system. When we're talking about shock, it's a pump problem, also known as the heart. It's a pipe problem, also known as veins and arteries, or it's a fluid problem, also known as blood. Or it could be a combination of all 3 of those things. Okay, so it's either a pump problem, a pipe problem, or a fluid problem. Okay, we have to figure out which 1, 2, or all 3 of those problems it is, and then we got to fix it. And unfortunately, at the basic level right now in our system, you guys can only do so much for this. Okay, but what you guys can do is a lot. All right. So don't think that you guys are, oh, well, I'm just a basic. I'm never going to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms of shock. Bullshit. You guys need to, okay? Because you guys need to be able to call for a medic and or an intermediate and or get their ass to the hospital quickly in order for that patient to not die, Okay, we're going to talk about some of the stages of shock, and we're going to talk about the stages of the shock where that shock becomes basically irreversible, where we're going to have some serious deficits for our patient, or our patient's no longer going to be living. Okay, so in the early stages, the body attempts to compensate. The body attempts to maintain homeostasis. Okay, however, as we progress and we progress and we progress, all right, we can't compensate anymore. All right. And that's where the problem comes in. That's why we, as medical providers, need to be able to recognize when our patients are in shock. So shock doesn't discriminate, guys, at all. Okay. Shock can occur because of all medical and traumatic events, it should say. Okay, specifically if a lot of things go untreated, all right? But specifically, the big ones are heart attacks, allergic reactions, which we covered in respiratory. It could be because of a motor vehicle crash. It could be because of a gunshot wound, or somebody fell 30 feet and landed on their butt. There's all kinds of different things that can cause shock, okay? Our coronavirus, right? If it goes untreated, the body goes into shock, all right? Remember, we have two enemies in EMS. We have two enemies in EMS. One we can fight, and one we really can't do anything about. Shock and intracranial pressure, or what we call ICP. And we're going to talk about ICP and trauma, but we could do a lot for shock. There's not much we can do for ICP, specifically at the basic level, and really not even that much we can do at the paramedic level, but we could do a lot for shock. Okay, and those are our two enemies, the evil twin sisters, shock and ICP, two totally different things, almost the complete opposites of each other. We're going to talk about that later on when we get into trauma. Oh my God, there they are again, the good old Fick principles. I believe this is the 6th lecture that I'm giving you guys where the Fick principles have been brought up. So I'm going to strongly suggest that you guys know your Fick principles. Okay? Strongly suggest that you guys know your Fick principles. All right? Number 1, oxygen must get into the lungs, also known as ventilation. Number 2, oxygen needs to get into the blood, also known as respiration. Remember, respiration is just adequate gas exchange at the alveoli level. That's all it means. Okay? Number 3, we need a good pump in order for that oxygen to be circulated through the body, also known as circulation, right? And then number 4, that oxygen needs to get into the cell, or what we call perfusion. Remember, with perfusion, it's gas exchange at the cellular level. Respiration was gas exchange at the alveoli level. Now perfusion is oxygen exchange at the cellular level. And in order to have good perfusion, we need a good, adequate amount of pressure in our body. Our heart, also known as our pump, needs to work. Our pipes need to be the right size. And we have to have enough fluid in order to maintain that pressure. So once again, shock is a pipe problem, a pump problem, or a fluid problem. That's all it is, guys. Okay, so our cells require adequate perfusion. We need to have a good pump. We need to have the right size pipes, and we need to have the right amount of fluid in order for that good oxygen exchange, gas exchange, to be unloaded into our cell, and all that nasty stuff to be offloaded from our cell in order to maintain homeostasis in our body. And our cells require both nutrients, oxygen, right, in order to survive, in order to produce energy for us. Okay? If our cells are not able to produce energy, if our cells are not able to be to remove waste, if our cells are not able to get the nutrients it needs, right? If the cells are not able to suck in that oxygen and use it for energy, we are having inadequate tissue perfusion. Our cells are going to start to die. Okay? And when our cells die, they like to take others with it. All right. And if we have this whole cascade of numerous cells dying all at once and continue to go on, we are now going into a state of shock. That hypoperfusion, that lack of perfusion, that inadequate tissue perfusion. We are going into shock. Okay? Remember that normal metabolism is aerobic. All right? I'm not going to spend too much time with the actual aerobic and anaerobic, but I want to point this out to you guys. When we're talking about aerobic metabolism, we're talking about metabolism that has oxygen. Okay? If our cells are able to get oxygen, they produce something called adenosine triphosphate, or what we call ATP for short. Okay? During your normal metabolic aerobic metabolism, all right, your cells will produce anywhere between 32 and 36 ATP. I know there's literature out there that'll say anywhere from 30 to 34, 31 to 33. They're all over the place. They really don't know. But anywhere between 32 and 36 is what I use. It seems to be the most standard in all the books. So it's anywhere between 32 and 36 ATP. Okay? If our cells do not get that oxygen, if we enter into an anaerobic metabolism, the ATP that we produce is 4 or less per cell. That is not sustainable with life. Okay? So we want to stay in that anaerobic metabolism, and we also want to help our patients stay in that we want to stay in that aerobic metabolism, and we want to try to help our patients stay in that aerobic metabolism as well, in order for them to not receive any deficits and continue living. Okay, so we go into anaerobic metabolism because we have a lack of oxygen going into our cells in order for our cells to produce energy for us. When we're talking about anaerobic metabolism, we are dealing with a problem with one or multiple of the actual Fick principles. So we have a problem with ventilation, we have a problem with respiration, we have a problem with circulation, or we have a problem with perfusion. Okay. The problem is that when we actually have less oxygen, we produce a very small amounts of energy. Our cells will actually produce a very small amount of energy in order to keep up with the actual body's demands. And because of this, the cells will actually start to die off. The protein structures around the cell will begin to denaturize, so they'll kind of start to pop, I guess is the best way to put it, if you had to put it as a picture. And this spills all that kind of nasty intracellular fluid into our body, which can also cause numerous problems with the heart and other systems in our body because we're building up so much acidity.